Hello, everybody. This is Michael Butterman, music director of the Boulder Philharmonic, and I'm pleased today to be talking with Charles Wetherbee, the concertmaster of the orchestra and also the soloist in the first concert of our 2021 reimagined season that features jazz playing the solo part to Vivaldi's Four Seasons Recomposed by Max Richter. All three of the pieces on this concert have in some way been reimagined either by the composer or perhaps by us. We're starting off by composer Jessie Montgomery called Strum. That's a piece actually, Chaz, that I know you've played as a member of a string quartet, and that's how it's, I think, most often presented, but it's also possible to play it as a string orchestra, which is what we're going to do. What is your experience like in playing that piece as a member of a quartet?
Strum is a wonderful piece. I have played it as a quartet a number of times. It's a really interesting work because she, in her own words, she revised it and sort of massaged it, tweaked it over a period of years. It existed as a string quintet, then as a string quartet, also as a string orchestra piece. And it really became a very kind of intricate piece with a lot of different kinds of rhythmic motifs that are layered over each other. It starts with a slow introduction that's begun by the viola in pizzicato alone, and it morphs into this sort of fast rolling section, which is similar rhythmic material and melodic material, but overlaid in each other. It's called Strum because so much of the piece has this kind of strumming ostinato going on, and it's a very catchy and kind of foot tapping effect, which I find interesting because oftentimes it is not always an even rhythm. Sometimes, and by even I mean that sometimes it's in 7/8 or 3/8 bars, things that would normally make us feel off kilter, and yet this piece really has a groove to it.
It is an exciting piece. I think it's fun to listen to, whether or not you're aware of those, eccentricities sometimes with the rhythm. In fact, the Vivaldi Four Seasons Recomposed is another piece that's usually played, it's usually 4/4 or 3/4, whatever, and Max Richter throws in all these sort of unexpected changes in the rhythms that kind of just, keep you on your toes.
Definitely. As I was looking at autumn and winter in particular in the Vivaldi Richter, I was just kind of thrown for a loop for a while, trying to figure out as I listened what on earth is going on there. And then of course when I saw the score, I was like, that's what he's up to. Okay.
Right. Well, let's talk about this piece then. Max Richter is a German-British composer. I guess you might almost describe him as a post-minimalist composer in a way. Mm-hmm. There's certainly elements of minimalism. There's actually a fair bit of minimalist tendency in a lot of Baroque music, especially in a lot of Vivaldi's music, if I may say, that he kind of takes to another place somehow. So when you hear this piece, as a listener, I find it very familiar. I mean, there's so much of what he's written that sounds very recognizably like Vivaldi Four Seasons. I mean, very recognizably, and yet it's not. So this is a piece that you have played the normal version of, I'm sure, many, many times in different contexts, with a conductor, without a conductor, with a small group, with maybe a larger group. How different is the solo part that you're having to learn than what you normally play?
It's surprising. As you just said, many long stretches go by where the music, the actual notes, are almost identical. What he's done different, though, is what would have been perhaps a 4-bar phrase has been repeated and then altered with slightly different harmonies, kind of in a minimalist way where certain chord progressions will kind of change one note at a time, a la Philip Glass or any of those kinds of works that you're familiar with. So they'll be extended for a considerably longer period than the original Vivaldi, and yet the basic notes are the same. And then suddenly there's just something that's completely different. In particular, there's a lot of sort of high lyrical passages, kind of slow, very evocative passages that the solo violin plays over the sort of, again, ostinato or repeating figures in the orchestra. And those parts are different. And then there's a number of more virtuosic fast passages that are different. The other thing that's different about it is even when the music is very similar, like in Autumn, which opens with that very familiar yup up 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 beat all the violin playing in a lot of thirds and sixths, double stops. But then certain bars have been changed rhythmically from what would have been a 4/4 to 7/8 and so forth. And even though the notes are not so different, the difference in the rhythmic structure makes it, there's a little practicing involved, I guess I'm saying.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's almost, I don't know. Is it harder in some ways to play something that you know so well, but have to keep on your toes, remembering, almost not allowing yourself to get into sort of the old groove of how this goes? Is it actually harder to do that than it would be to learn sort of a brand new piece that you never played?
It's challenging in a different way. There's one passage, for instance, in Winter in particular. It's a passage in 30-second notes that kind of climbs up the instrument, climbs up the E string, and it's the kind of passage. It's quite fast. Once you've learned it and sort of gotten it into the groove of it, you know it. He presents the passage once or twice as Vivaldi wrote it, but then he presents it again in a foreshortened form, and there's not as many 30-second notes as there should be. And wrapping your head around playing the groove, except it's not because it's been changed, is really, really challenging.
I can well imagine. So it's, well, anyway, it's obviously challenging to play, but delightful to listen to. I have to say, it's just it's familiar and fresh at the same time, which is, I think, a nice combination.
Yeah, it's quite wonderful. There's something about it, I would say, that at times it almost has kind of a new age sound to it, but I mean that in a complimentary way, that it can be, there's moments when he does some of these extensions of the music that I find very meditative. I mean, I guess that's why people have sometimes called some of the minimalist music trance music, It has a little bit of that quality of, like, it starts to lull you a little bit just into this happy place, and then of course it'll go on to familiar and sometimes unfamiliar directions from that. But it's very attractive.
I think so too. So let's just talk for a moment about the way that this is being presented. We are filming this, recording this ahead of time in an airplane hangar, and there will be no live audience. We're going to be editing the work together with different camera angles, adding some captions and so on. You've done a little bit of that this past summer already with Chamber Music Festival that you work with, actually a couple different ones, if I'm not mistaken. So you have a little bit of experience doing this. What's it like, performing really to a camera rather than to a live audience? And does that kind of take some of the edge off of, I don't know, maybe one's performance nerves, or does it, or do you actually end up really missing that extra shot of adrenaline that you get maybe when there's a live audience present?
Yeah, it's a great question. I miss the audience terribly, because for me, what's very challenging is that when you play for an audience, you're aware of them. You feel the energy, the electricity, the presence of the audience. Sometimes you hear the audience if they let out an involuntary bit of applause between movements or whatever it is. You really get something from that. And so your focus is on the audience and on that part of performing, which is, as we always, say, communicative. When you're recording, like when people record a CD, there's no audience, there's a bunch of microphones, and there's going to be a certain amount of editing that takes place. And your mindset very much changes, because what you're aware of is that on a CD, when somebody plays it at home as many times as they want, they can go back to hear the slightest blemish of sound, the slightest note that you feel you could have played better. Everything could be played over and over until it's heard. So the focus in recording for decades has been on a kind of perfection, and very much not focused on the what's spontaneous in a live performance. I've played live performances that have been so fun and exciting, and I'm sure if I listened to the recording, I would say, oh, but that note there was a little out of tune. Who cares? That's not what a performance is about, right? But for these performances with the camera, it's very difficult not to find yourself slipping into that stress of worrying that, oh, it just has to be perfect.
Right.
Because
Right.
what if people play it again and somehow go back and find the, you know? So that's been my challenge, that I don't want to be in a mindset like I feel like I'm recording something. I want to feel like it's a performance. But as you said, there's only camera lenses, there's not people. So how do you summon that frame of mind?
It will be a challenge without question. But yet I hope that these have the feel ultimately of live performances that have simply been captured on film.
Right.
Rather than ones that, as you say, we've sort of clinically sanitized to the nth degree. Because, as you said, when you do that, sometimes you end up removing some of the that which is the most important aspect of music, which is that sense of just human to human communication.
I imagine that for the most part, we are going to be simply performing the piece in front of the camera, and that's basically it.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, we won't really have enough time to do a lot of retakes.
Exactly. There's a very good thing about that. I really think that's lucky.
Yeah, I do too, actually. So we are also on this program going to be hearing music by Benjamin Britten, his simple symphony. And I mentioned that this is a reworking in a way as well, because although it was still completed when he was a teenager, if I'm not mistaken, the material of it is taken from some piano works that he wrote when he was even younger than that. And it's another piece for string orchestra. This whole program is for a string orchestra. That's another very lively and energetic piece, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of fun to listen to, a lot of fun to play. So Chaz, we're looking forward to the Richter and the Montgomery and the Britten coming up here on our first concert. We look forward to your performance of the Richter in particular. Thank you for joining us now.